Why so glum, player 2? We're coming up on the end of the game session and I'm only at conflict 2. I'll never master the dark side at this rate. Hey, look over there! An orphanage? Yeah, just lob a grenade in and you should be all set. That's a great idea!
Not so fast, children.
Wow, Emperor Palpatine!
You can't just throw grenades willy-nilly for easy conflict.
I guess.
Only a rookie Darksider master relies on mass murder.
Really?
That's right. If you blow up that orphanage, what are you going to do at the end of next session? And the session after that? What you want to do is meter out your orphans. That way, if you end a session short on conflict, you just grab yourself an orphan, one hand on the chin, and come on, don't be difficult. You knew what this was. There we go. Straight to conflict 10. Guaranteed Darkside mastery in an average of only 10 sessions.
Thanks, Emperor Palpatine. Now we know.
And knowing is the path to the dark side.
Okay, so the sketch you just saw is a bit of an exaggeration. Force and Destiny introduces a mechanic that is designed as an alternative or an addition to the obligation system presented in Edge of the Empire, or the duty system from Age of Rebellion, which I'll cover in a few months in another video. Morality is intended to provide players and GMs a way to represent an ascent towards strength in the light side of the Force, or a descent into mastery of the dark side. But players and GMs have quickly noted some issues with the morality system and the application of conflict, and you're going to have to get used to those sorts of issues if you want to run 50 sessions of Force and Destiny. So, Force and Destiny is the Force user branch of the Star Wars narrative dice system created by Fantasy Flight and currently published by Edge. So a quick recap of how the system works. When players roll for checks, they use a combination of ability and proficiency dice, sometimes supplemented by boost dice. These provide success, advantage, and triumph symbols. In that same roll, the GM assigns the player 1 to 5 difficulty dice, sometimes upgrading these purple dice to red challenge dice, and occasionally throwing in a setback die. These produce failure, threat, and despair symbols. The sum of these symbols are compared, failure versus success, advantage versus threat, but triumph and despair do not offset each other and are executed separately. These are used to help create a narrative for the outcome of a check. As with Edge, there are also Destiny tokens which are generated at the start of each session. Both the GM and players can flip these tokens to enhance rolls, activate certain talents or force powers, or introduce a small range of narrative effects into the session. If you want more details about both of these systems, check out my videos on Edge of the Empire. Force and Destiny is a hefty core rulebook, clocking in at 444 pages at $65 US. You do not need a copy of Edge of the Empire, but some experience with Edge will streamline your Force and Destiny gameplay. The book sections are organized in a similar fashion, but each section is a bit more Force user oriented. For example, in the specialization trees, Force talents are the norm rather than requiring a separate universal spec. The Atom chapter has a robust section on lightsaber modifications. There are more Jedi and Sith oriented vehicle designs. The Galaxy chapter highlights many of the ancient mysteries that players and GMs could potentially explore, rather than focusing on the crime lords and authorities of Edge. Same with provided adversaries. You'll see Inquisitors, Witches, Gladiators, and other Force-powered threats. And the Force chapter itself is robust, featuring 11 Force powers as opposed to the 3 provided in the other core rulebooks. The art is excellent, as Fantasy Flight had built up an even larger collection of original work across their line of Star Wars games in the year leading since publishing Edge. There is still some back and forth in the book. Detailed talent descriptions are found in a separate chapter from the specialization trees, and if a weapon has the disorient trait, you have to flip to the beginning of the item description to find out that it induces the disoriented condition, then flip deep into the combat chapter to find out what the disoriented condition does. It has a setback die to the target, in case you're wondering. So for my campaign, I chose the Old Republic setting, specifically the post-Eternal Alliance era. In an effort to shore up the Jedi's flagging numbers, Master Akai Ad-Ados proposes a daring plan to temporarily expand the number of Padawans each Jedi Master can individually teach, from 1 to 4. Master Ados takes his 4 Padawans to an enclave on the remote Felucia, where they spend several years under his tutelage. This all comes to an abrupt halt one day when Master Ados murders a visiting Jedi Master. Ados promises to turn himself in, but demands that his Padawans leave as quickly as they can to avoid being detained by the Jedi. He gives them coordinates to the planet Teth, and reassures them that another Master, Zalea Taral, will complete their training. Arriving on Teth, they find several dead Sith acolytes and a dead Jedi Master. They see a Sith pureblood pushing a large metal container towards her spaceship. The effort is difficult as she has lost a leg in her battle with the Jedi. Confronting her, they learn that she is Zalea Taral, and that she and Master Eidos had been researching a poisoning of the Force since their days in the Eternal Alliance. Their hope was to take on their quest with 8 students and 2 masters, but due to their misfortune, their already small force is cut in half. The campaign took the Padawans on a grand tour of the galaxy, always on the run from the Jedi, and always cautious of Zelaya's Sith allies, as well as Zelaya herself. For while Zelaya Taral was a committed scholar like Master Eidos, she had her own ambitions and would often recommend missions that furthered her standing with the Sith Empire. These conditions molded 3 of the characters into powerful Jedi Knights, but also convinced the 4th to side with the Sith Empire in the end. So what's to like about Force and Destiny? Well, if you want to be one of those space words that you hear so much about, this is the version of the core rulebooks you want. This book will provide you with a collection of lore from which to build a potential Force-oriented campaign, including snippets from the movies, games, novels, and comic books, as well as giving players a range of Force-using classes and specialization. And what's nice about the specs is that they are tradition agnostic. So if your players want to be a Jedi Mystic, or a Sith Mystic, or a Mystic from a neglected or unexplored civilization, those options are all available to the players. The Force powers and feats that you see in the movies and some of the video games are well represented, and players take great satisfaction in working their way up to the powers displayed by their favorite Star Wars characters. The combination of lightsaber mods and combat talents give players a fun way to customize their approach to aggressive negotiations. And everything you already like about Edge of the Empire can be found here as well. Robust execution of the narrative dice, narrative uses of the Destiny tokens, and a common fantasy baseline with the setting that the entire table knows pretty well. But what is going on with the morality system and its tie-in mechanic conflict? A basic rundown of the morality system. Off the bat, you can see a couple of issues with this system. First start is the GM now has to be on the lookout for possible conflict moments in the session, because if they don't, players will climb up in morality very quickly, rendering conflict mostly irrelevant. All characters start the session with a conflict of 1. As characters perform morally questionable actions in accordance with Table 9-2 on page 324, the GM will increase their conflict. At the end of the session, players roll a d10 and compare it to their ending conflict. If the roll is above their conflict, their long-term morality score increases, taking them on the road towards strength and the light. If the roll is below their conflict, their long-term morality score decreases, furthering their journey on the path to the dark. If the two are equal, their morality doesn't change. There are additional effects for going above or below certain thresholds of morality, many of which are beneficial, and players who want to go dark will never have the chance to do so, assuming that's something you want to offer in a campaign. The other problem comes with trying to quantify morality itself. As the GM adage goes, players are very good at optimizing the fun out of a game. But isn't that just part of the GM's overall job, you might say? Well, yes. But compare morality with Edge's obligation system. Obligation does a better job of tying the player to their background and the setting itself. Morality is shaped by the player's background, but the conflict components of the system tend to be very event-specific. Players have lots of roleplay options to rapidly inflate or shrink their morality score, including the aforementioned gradate into the orphanage. So, what would I recommend for this system? For a start, I would suggest rolling for morality at the start of the next session rather than the end of the current session. Since I record my games, this gives me the opportunity to review dice rolls and the conflict of player actions and get a more accurate tally of conflict. Next, consider adjusting the D10 used for conflict to the size of sessions you run. I run 2 to 3 hour sessions, so a D10 rolls a bit high to make conflict a real challenge for players. I switch to a D8. If you play even shorter sessions, consider a D6. If you run super long sessions, maybe move up to a D12. Consider adjusting the conflict table to the campaign you want to run. If you're running a mostly light side campaign, stick to the table as written. If you want a blend of dark and light side characters, maybe add an additional conflict point to each step on the chart. This makes players pause a little more on immoral actions, but also gives would-be dark side players a way to hide how low their morality is going. And speaking of hidden morality, consider letting players hide their force power rolls. Foundry VTT allows a GM roll, where only the GM and the player get to see the outcome of the dice. This keeps the rest of the player group from knowing when they utilize dark side pips on the force dice. That also means doing away with flipping a Destiny token, which isn't actually that costly to the overall session. Players will run out of light side tokens very quickly if they dip into the dark side, which could stir some resentment between players over this shared resource. And we don't want any player betrayal in real life. Probably. Outside of the morality system, I will also say that Force-using characters operate on a very different XP curve than the non-Force using characters a player might make in Edge of the Empire or Age of Rebellion. 15 XP a session doesn't go as far when you start the game with too fewer freebie skills and have to pay for Force powers alongside your other advancements. I gave my players a Force power XP bonus on top of their overall XP. I wanted to give them a chance to explore the power trees without having to sacrifice talents and skills. Your mileage may vary. Anyway, that's my experience running 50 sessions of Force and Destiny. Let me know what you think of the morality system, the core book, and the setting itself in the comments. And happy gaming!